Leslie Fajardo. I have been working in the last 20 years in closing inequities and addressing mostly that in Peru and in the United States. I have also worked in the last 10 years in grant making, so advising organizations like philanthropy, where I have spent 7 years of my life. So I'm so glad that today I saw a lot of my grantees here, and I appreciate a lot the hard work that you have, and also the huge responsibilities. Also, kudos to everybody who has that task. And at the same time, I have been advising also all different levels of government that goes from the local all the way to federal, with so many different, what you probably know that already, but with so many different experiences that today I'm going to be sharing with all of you. So, and now I will let Dr. Chelsea to continue her presentation. Thanks.
To help with the alphabet soup throughout the conference today, we have some acronyms defined on this slide that can be revisited. ROACs are Regional Opioid Abatement Councils. GROC is the Region 10 Council Gateway to the Rockies. SOP is Standard Operating Procedure. MOUs are Memorandums of Understanding, and KPIs are Key Performance Indicators. Linking back to COAC values, true to my decade of academic training, throughout the slide deck, you will see superscript numbers. These link the concept back to one of the 5 state values. It might seem like we're describing extra work for you to do, but I promise we are just describing how to do your job with intention and purpose. Before we dive into the infrastructure and equity of grant making, it is important to briefly discuss the role of a fiscal agency relationship policy. If something is not written down, it is not policy, it is personal opinion. Since ROACs are connected to counties' finance departments, which serve as a fiscal agent, there should be a policy that describes the processes and nature of that relationship. This policy establishes the rules and safeguards that guide how a government entity, like Jefferson County, can act as the fiscal agent for another party or the principal, like a ROAC, or more specifically, the GROC. In simple terms, being a fiscal agent means the government entity, often a county, manages funds on behalf of another organization, ensuring money is received, tracked, and dispersed properly. Because this role carries legal, financial, and reputational risks, this policy sets clear expectations for when a government entity may take on this role, under what conditions, and in what ways. The policy should require a formal written agreement between the fiscal agent and the ROAC that describes the how of fiscal agency. The agreement should outline each party's responsibilities, protect the county as fiscal agent from undue liability, and ensure that all actions are reviewed and approved by key officials like legal, finance managers, and other county managers when appropriate. In addition, the policy clarifies how existing policies and procedures apply or do not apply. This is the most important part, in my personal opinion. By default, all standard rules of the government entity serving as the fiscal agent govern this relationship. However, if the principal, in this case a ROAC, requests different processes, deviations may be allowed if they are review approved and determined to be low risk. It is important to conceptualize that ROACs are grant makers, and counties often default to procurement processes. As we'll go over in the next several slides, grant making is distinctly different from procurement. Within the work of grant making, there are 2 essential components: grant administration and grant management. They're often used interchangeably and conflated, but they serve distinct roles, and I'll clarify that throughout the presentation. Today, I'll be speaking from the perspective of the ROAC as a grant maker, or as the state as a grant maker. Developing a strong grant-making infrastructure is vital to sustaining long-term impact and maximizing the use of the opioid settlement funds. The infrastructure is foundational to the work of ROACs, ensuring that our decisions are strategic, transparent, and built for lasting change. We've seen what happens when this foundation is not in place with similar funding like the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. During the ARPA rollout, Funding reached communities faster than the systems built to manage it. Many counties had to stand up compliance tools, reporting processes, and data systems after money was already flowing. That caused delays, inconsistent reporting, and limited ability to measure results or impact. The lesson is clear. Funding alone does not create impact. The infrastructure we are going to describe today does. By building our grant-making framework early with clear policies, data systems, and oversight, ROACs can avoid these pitfalls and ensure every dollar is accountable, equitable, and tied to a measurable outcome. In short, we're not just distributing funds, we're building a sustainable, evidence-driven system that turns investments into real lasting change in our communities. This slide helps clarify the distinction between grant administration and grant management across different stages and responsibilities in the grant life cycle. The primary focus of administration is on compliance, accountability, and the execution side of grants. It's about making sure the funds are used properly and regulations are met. Management is more strategic. It's about planning, aligning with goals, and overseeing the entire life cycle. It looks at the bigger picture of, are we achieving what the grant was meant to accomplish? Scope for administration is primarily post-award, but there is some legal component that might happen pre-award. The main scope of management covers the entire life cycle, from developing proposals, coordinating implementation, and later evaluating outcomes. Administration tasks have key responsibilities around financial tracking, regulatory adherence, reporting and compliance checks. Management tasks include proposal development, stakeholder coordination, risk and impact assessments. Timeline for administration, again, is mostly after the grant is awarded, but it may include some pre-award compliance prep. Management spans pre-award to post-award, from when we begin drafting our funding opportunities to continues through implementation and evaluation. The primary goal of administration is to ensure that funds are used correctly and that all obligations are met, basically doing things right. The goal of management is to ensure that grants align with ROAC goals and produce meaningful outcomes, or doing the right things. In short, administration is about compliance and execution, while management is about strategy and impact. Both are essential. One ensures we meet requirements, and the other ensures we maximize results. Best practices in grant administration are about building systems that ensure accountability, efficiency, and transparency throughout the grant lifecycle. The 4 areas of compliance, documentation, timeliness, and risk mitigation are the pillars that keep programs running smoothly. Compliance involves ensuring grantees adhere to ROAC requirements on spending, deadlines, and allowable costs as outlined in their contract, but also that ROACs as a whole are following state requirements. Strong documentation ensures transparency by supporting audits, communication, and accountability. Timeliness keeps projects moving. We don't want grants to be awarded in June and then contracted in December. It happens. Proactive risk management promotes accountability and long-term sustainability. So best practices in grant administration are not just about compliance, but they're about building trust, ensuring integrity, and delivering measurable impact. Now we can look at grant management, which is the strategic side. Again, grant administration focuses on compliance and accountability, while management emphasizes strategy, coordination, and achieving impact. So this is aligning objectives of funding requests, ensuring proposals have objectives that are further aligned with the ROAC's broader mission, and ensures efforts are purposeful and sustainable. Stakeholder collaboration is critical. We heard several conversations about that this morning. But making sure that your advisory members, your voting members, your grantees, and even your participating local governments within your region have a seat at the table, and you are working to build a network of care within the region, not having siloed programs being funded. Ongoing monitoring keeps projects on task, and again, it helps you look at that bigger picture of the network of care you're building in your region. And then good risk management involves identifying risk early, such as scope changes or resource shortages, and planning responses. Now that we've covered administration and management separately, this slide ties them together. There are cross-cutting practices that strengthen both, making our grant programs more efficient and effective. Technology enhances both administration and management. Tools like eUna, Amplifunds, Submittable streamline budgeting, deadline tracking, and compliance all in one place. You don't want 5 different spreadsheets of finances and then your workday budget, and then the grantee also has their own finances. Everything is going to get disjointed and you're never going to know what your budget is. Continuous training keeps teams confident and compliant. So how are we using these systems together? And what policies need to be revamped. Coordination across roles is where the framework is built. So administration focuses on execution and compliance. Management focuses on strategy and outcomes, but they rely on each other. Strategy guides execution, administrative data informs future planning. So technology training and teamwork connect administration to management within this unified process. This slide gives you a big picture look at the full grant life cycle from planning to closeout. The process begins with strategic assessment of regional needs and curating intentional explicit funding opportunity announcements in that pre-award planning phase. In the award and contracting phase, once funded, we establish an administrative and legal framework like agreements, terms, and risk mitigation strategies. Implementation and monitoring is the third phase. This is the action phase where plans start to become results. We execute programs, monitor progress, and adjust as needed. Administration ensures accuracy and compliance, and management drives that performance. Finally, you have the closeout and evaluation phase, which is reporting and reflection. The next few slides will take a closer look at each phase. So in the pre-award phase, we are going to look at that dual focus of grant administration and grant management, because you need to have policies for each one and how they intersect together. If you lump it all in one spot, who is doing what, how, becomes very confusing. So administration ensures funding applications include required legal questions, financial disclosure prompts, a standardized budget template, and applicants are eligible for the funding opportunity. The management focus is strategic, where you're looking at a needs assessment, identified priorities, developing the funding proposal, ask how is that aligned with the mission and the strategic goals of the ROAC, and then combined with ROAC voting members, advisory members, participating local government members, current grantees, you develop your program theory and outcomes framework. So you as a ROAC are moving in the same direction and you don't have individual grants going different directions, kind of towards the same goal, but taking a roundabout way. In the award phase, this is where you set the foundation for every dollar, partnership, and process being supported into that same mission. The administrative focus is on building a foundation for data integrity. Data is not just outcomes data. Data includes financial metrics. And so you're looking at a dollar to outcome measurement. But administration sets up the systems for supportive evidence-based decisions, processing legal financial documentation, establishing fund disbursement systems, and setting up compliance tracking, all creating that infrastructure for reliable data. The management side is focused on aligning partnerships with evidence-based practice, making sure that funded programs strengthen our capacity to collect and apply meaningful evidence for future investments. So the infrastructure established here is what leads to that sustainable impact. The award phase connects the operational and the meaningful. This phase might look technical, but it's really where we make sure our systems produce credible, usable data that we can replicate over time. Once the award phase is set up, we move into the implementation phase where planning becomes action. This is where financial stewardship and program leadership translate into real impact, aligning with our state values. This is also the phase that I believe has the most cracks currently in opioid settlement funding. Administration focuses on financial stewardship. We track expenditures and reconciliations to confirm funds are spent responsibly and equitably as outlined in the funded program's application and contract, meaning you have to be doing rigorous financial audits. Management focuses on program leadership. So ROACs oversee implementation of funded programs, ensuring that projects are on track and reaching people most at risk. You have to be tracking milestones and KPIs, key performance indicators, to turn evidence into action. If you're not actively tracking those, you don't have good risk management, and so then you can't help grantees adjust course. Maybe they need additional funds somewhere. Maybe they need to move money between line items. What is your policy for that? What is your process for that? If you catch it early enough, you can keep them on track. Maybe they hit a speed bump instead of getting stuck in a ditch. Integration and oversight is where we really bring that administration and management together, balancing accountability and agility. Administration maintains transparency and compliance, while management ensures funds drive evidence-based outcomes. Implementation is not just about moving money, it's about moving outcomes. The final stage in the grant lifecycle is monitoring and closeout, so our focus shifts to accountability, learning, and sustainability. Administration is focused on really closing out the award with final performance reports confirming financial and program outcomes are being closed out. Management is focused on impact and learning. Management uses this phase to evaluate impact and strengthen future work. So we conduct comprehensive impact evaluations to assess effectiveness and cost efficiency. Lessons learned are documented to improve future funding cycles. Do you need to ask additional questions in your funding proposal announcement to help get you preliminary data for measuring impact? We also plan for sustainability and scale up of successful interventions. Together, administration and management bring the grant full circle from compliance to impact. Administration ensures responsible closure, and management ensures continuous learning and wise reinvestment. As we wrap up the discussion on the grant-making infrastructure, it's important to recognize some common pitfalls, especially due to the fiscal agency partnership. These challenges highlight why the fiscal agency relationship policy is so critical. When I was initially doing this slide, I was like, this is not relevant to single county ROACs, but it is still relevant to you because you are a grant maker, you are not a procurement department. So you run your grant making extremely different, and this policy is what's gonna help you deviate from that current procurement policy. Many pitfalls stem from fragmented processes and poor coordination. Decentralized systems make tracking funds difficult, and disconnected reporting tools complicate grantee management. Inconsistent disbursements and limited visibility between financial and programmatic activity increase risk and administrative burden. These aren't just technical issues, these are governance issues. The fiscal agency relationship policy addresses these gaps, protects both the fiscal agent and our funded partners, while still empowering ROACs to conduct business as they deem appropriate. The fiscal agency relationship policy addresses many of these pitfalls by clearly defining the fiscal agent's role in partnering with the ROAC, establishing accountability and oversight of both the fiscal agent and the ROAC, describing how fiscal agent policies and procedures apply, or explicitly defines when and how they deviate. In other words, it ensures ROAC policies and procedures are consistent. Finally, it promotes transparency and partnership between the fiscal agent and the ROAC. This policy turns complex fiscal processes into clear, accountable partnerships. For Region 10, it clearly delegates most of the grant administration work to the fiscal agent and all of the grant management work to the program manager at the direction of the regional council. It helps prevent pitfalls by ensuring transparency, defining responsibilities, and supporting fiscal management that advances our public health outcomes. Ultimately allows the fiscal agent to manage the funds on behalf of, under the direction of, the ROAC, ensuring every dollar supports our shared mission. And with that, I will now turn the presentation over to Leslie, who will discuss how to continue to weave in equity considerations in grant making.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chelsea. Okay, let's go move up. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, probably my brain's gonna take a minute to kind of make sure that I'm doing all the things at the same time. So again, thank you so much for being here today. I'm more than honored to be sharing some of the best practices and recommendations that I have seen during my time doing grant making. Like right now, working with a local government has given me also a different perspective about how to build this. I know here in the room there are some grant makers as well as some grantees or some grant applicants, so I think the message is going to be for both of you. If you have questions, please bring it at the end of the conversation. So just to start with, I am a senior associate at JSI. So JSI is a nonprofit organization. We do consulting work in different sectors, as well as we focus our work in public health, education, and economy. And I work for the Colorado office. So those are going to be the 4 different core foundations that we want to discuss today in terms of like the best practices. So I will start with the grant administration and efficiency. So let's go and think about it, how when we open the first time a grant application, what is the first impression that we have? And the first impression sometimes is like how complex this application is, or how long this application is, or what is the right language that they are using right here. So sometimes we need even interpretation for that. So for those who are grant makers, so think about it, how would you like to be more inclusive? And when we talk about inclusivity, it goes even with the language that you are using. Simplifying the language will help a lot to actually reach out to those who probably are not a 501c3, maybe they are grassroots organization, resident-led, community, who don't have a grant writer who is in their staff, or they don't have the budget for getting that. So think about those pieces, and also think about how this is gonna be eliminating some of those constraints that already exist for applications. Could you raise your hand if you have when you saw the first time an application, you were like, oof, this is gonna take me a long time. Okay, so I'm with you, Also think about the flexibility that you're gonna be having around that. So all the grants sometimes are treated as the same, and they shouldn't. Some of those grants could be $5,000, and others will be maybe $500,000. I think that there has to be all the time a conversation internally as a grant maker. What is the process that you want for reports, and how you want to be also helpful to your community? Because again, when you're doing grant making, it's not just allocating funding, you also are building relationship with the community, and the best part, you are building trust. So here's some of the tips of success. Of course, there are so many others. This is just something that I thought it would be relevant for today. Technical assistance. So one of the challenges that, as we mentioned early, is to actually understand what is the process of grant making. So having a proactive technical assistance a part of your grant making process will help a lot to have office hours, to have somebody who answers the phone, to have somebody who can have a workshop with you. Also, will be amazing if we can have a living Q&A document where we don't have sometimes to go to because we don't have the time, we're always busy, but we're having a document that can help grant applicants to actually answer those questions ahead of time. Maybe they will have more specific questions. So there are so many missing opportunities sometimes when it could be very simple. Again, simple, but in the same time, as a grant maker, you always have the opportunity to reflect on the capacity that you have to provide those services as well, because you don't want to be providing these opportunities and not be able to respond to the demand. I have had opportunities working with the federal government. When we were opening those office hours, we have hundreds of people reaching to the point that we were not able to be supported to the community. So you have to really be careful about that. I have also opportunity working for the federal government where we don't have anybody showing up there, and we were ready for having those conversations. So think about internally, what are those parts that you want to focus, as well as And this is a conversation that's been happening for a long time. It's about general operating. So most of the grants usually are focused on programming. What it gets, it's amazing because we can bring a lot of different opportunities to community. And at the same time, those programs need staff. They need a venue. They need to pay the bills. So general operating is something that is still a conversation for many grant makers. So think through that. How would you like to set up everything for success? And this is one part that I want to focus is like, focus on the local knowledge that exists. So today when we were in the plenary, we hear a lot about lived experience. So community knows better. Community had the answers of the work. So trust-based grant making, it should be something that we can keep that in mind. Something that I love what Dr. Chelsea mentioned is about how grant making is not procurement. So think about it, how you can be relying on those incredible projects that exist and how much is the willingness also that you have as an organization to do that. So centering community. This is, I told you it would take me a minute. Okay, there you go. So defining risk. Here's two different concepts in terms of defining risk. One is around how you're using the data to define where are those areas where you want to make the investments, correct? Another one is how you are willing to have risk. What is your risk tolerance that you have as a grant maker to be investing in programs in organizations that may not be the traditional way to see it? I think removing some of those requirements are so important for making this approach more equitable because that will bring you grassroots organizations. That will bring you a different also way how projects are could be implemented or how those projects could be even like designed. I put it also around eligibility that I mentioned early about what is it goes with your tolerance of risk as well. And also the language. And when I say language, it's not necessarily like having a multiple language, but it's also something that will be very, very helpful for communities. It's also how you simplify the language, how you make it so easy, and also what are the materials that you're going to be providing to all the potential applicants. I'm going to just have a little parenthesis here. I do remember going to an organization that I was really excited to apply for a program, and I was just helping them as a volunteer. It was it was still work, but volunteer work. And one of the pieces that I was really impressed is that this organization was able to provide a step-by-step how the grant applicant should be applying. What are those documents? Even taking pictures of how to get your SAM.gov card that sometimes is so hard to get it. So even all the troubleshooting. So I thought that was such an important piece because if you are a grassroots organization, you are a group of people who wants to start moving forward, and you're going to be working with a physical sponsor that may or may not have much idea also how a state or federal government works, you have to be really intentional on what kind of information you're going to be providing and how you want to do this work with them. This is, when I put together this slide a long time ago, this was based on one question that I was going over and over and over in all my presentations. And maybe it's not going to resonate for you because I know that you're so into this, but they asked me, why center the community in our decisions? And the answer is very simple. Because they know better. Because they have the answer. Because we can spend so much time reading the data, analyzing the data. We can understand the different models. They maybe don't even be important for the work that the community is doing, because community can do it right away. They can be answering questions, and also they have this approach that's a community-initiated solutions. So they have way more understanding on that, and they will be basic on the on-the-ground needs. What we sometimes can be a miss and a miss more than a hit, really. Did I move it? Yep. Okay. In the last 4 years, 5 years, I have had the amazing experience to have people to organizations, grant makers, who really want to be intentional on having community voice as a part of the grant review process. That's been an incredible opportunity, not only for balance the power and not have this top-down approach that usually happens in grant making, but also for bringing the vision of the community. So I recommend for people to actually start thinking, especially grant makers, and grant applicants as well, because this is a great opportunity for sharing with them that there are other models beyond the traditional way to see grant making, where you can have a voice as a community and represent your community and also review all those different projects that exist. And if you are in the process of developing your grant making approach, so please consider also to assign budget to pay to community members. Community members, community experts, they have to have this recognition and value, and we have to pay for the time that they are investing in the impact of our own community. So let's go and talk a little bit about evaluation. And I know it's been very hard to be able to build grant-making process for projects that can go 2, 3, 5 years, what would be more sustainable and also more intentional, right? Because when the funding disappears, it's a little hard really to know if you have actually achieved or not, and how you're looking at success. So one of the questions that I always bring to communities, and especially to organizations who are going to be applying, is that you have a better understanding how success looks like than actually the grant-making process. The grant-making process cannot be looking at the big picture in terms of how you are going to be seeing success, but you can teach them in your applications how success looks for you. And also, for me as a reviewer for so many years, for 10 years, reading thousands of applications, I would say that I have learned in each of those applications not only the why they're doing the work, but also how to do the work. And that has helped me to actually help others to build a better process. So when you are working on your applications, it's not just that you are sharing information how the project would look like, but also you are sharing with us how you would like to see the work, and don't be afraid of that. I think that for sure you have to answer all the questions that they are, especially if you are working, applying for state or federal funding, but it's always an opportunity for you to share more of that. And why I'm saying this is because we are seeing this no long-term view that in grant making that has to be said and has to be reminding to all the grant makers in terms of that. Okay, I'm going very close to, and I have less than 5 minutes, I feel, because I can see the sign coming up. So in terms of accountability, so I think that here there is a responsibility in both sides, not only for the who are allocating the funding, but also for us as a grantees when we are sharing all of that. And it has to be also how this project, beyond the 2 years funding or the 12 months funding that is going to be existent, what is the way how you want to see those grant makers to be accountable for you and for your work in terms of sustainability. So this is one of the pieces that when you have the opportunity to fill out those reports and also those surveys or feedback documents that they send you at the end of your project, send that too and talk more about the accountability piece as well. I'm going to finish with this. Those are the C's of effective grant making. As you can see, are divided in 3 pieces: administration, equity, and evaluation. And all of them has to do with willingness to really make things happen. For those who are grant makers, I forgot to mention that if you are working with taxpayer money or you are working with money that it's actually allocated for taxpayer money or like opioid settlement that is not necessarily taxpayer, always work with your lawyers, because the lawyers will give you a good way of your guardrails, but at the same time, they will give you the interpretation that you maybe are needing. So I'm working right now with a different group of lawyers in different levels, and I would have to say that when there's willingness, and I love this word, it's gonna be a way of interpretation, and there are gonna be ways how you can, if you're a grant maker, you can actually have opportunity for more conversation. And that's it, that's just me. Call for action. Please fund everything that is unfundable. So there's something that is risky, be nimble and fund that. Also, invest in systems, so coalitions, infrastructure, that's what we need right now. And for sure, invite always to your community to be your best advisors, because again, nobody knows better than them. Thank you.
We do have a few minutes for questions, so we want to go ahead and open the floor. We have 2 individuals with microphones right here. If you want to give us your name and then tell us where you're from and then ask your question, please.
Sure. Hi, my name is John Narayan. I'm with Recovery Friendly Leader. We train managers how to support employees in recovery. Thank you so much. And Dr. Chelsea, I met with you before, and thank you for all your support. When it comes to the grant making process, this was very, very helpful for me to understand as a applicant, right, in the future. One thing I have a concern with, it wasn't mentioned here, I apologize because I did have a sidebar in case you mentioned it. No one specific, but just as a general concern, timeline, especially, I think you mentioned flexibility, especially with grassroots organizations. Well, grassroots organizations aren't resourced to stop what they're doing and apply for something due 15 days later. That's my most recent experience. I don't think with anyone here, but we had a webinar on October 15th, due October 31st. I'm not applying, I can't. The AG's newest grant is probably the best example of a timeline. They just released it and it's due December 18th. That makes sense for an organization like me where I'm the only staff member. So if that could be considered in maybe how you or how anyone's does grant, it's really helpful for an organization like myself, and I'm sure many others, where we don't have the money to hire the Stedman Group or get somebody else to do it for us. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Chelsea. Brooke Fishburne, Stedman Group, the referred to Stedman Group. Okay, first, thank you very much for your presentation. Second, thank you for allowing all of the ROACs to steal your standard operating procedures. And if you haven't yet, steal them. Round of applause for Dr. Chelsea. Huge advancement in the work. Nitty-gritty question, lining up the ROAC procurement processes with the COAC funding. How do you do it? What's the timing? What's the contract period? What's been your experience, and what do you recommend to the ROACs?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the question, Berg, and you're welcome for the SOP. Thank you for the acknowledgement. So for Region 10, what I'm seeing with the state funding cycle, and I would love for me to be on the same funding cycle, because then you get these really nice, pretty lines of due dates for quarterly reports, for expense reporting, invoicing expenses. I will not do another RFA until next summer at the absolute earliest. I'm finding that contracting is taking me like closer to 5 months, not the 2 months that they initially quoted me. And so if I do the RFA in summer and then I contract in fall, that would give me a January 1 start date for all of my awardees, and then I'm on the calendar. It's also important that I don't yet have that grant management and administration framework set up. And so I have 11 contracts that I need to figure out how they invoice, how they quarterly report, and what does my own audit look like before I add on any more contracts and before I pull down any more money. I have to figure out what that looks like. So I think waiting until summer would be your best bet, and then honestly, it would be like a spring RFA, a summer review, a fall contract fall and winter contract would make the most sense. So I still might be a little bit more behind, but it just depends on your legal contracting. And then we have time for one more question, and then Leslie and I both have our emails up there. They're on the QR code. We'll be around at the conference today if you want to stop and chat.
We'll bring the mic over here for the last question. It is lunchtime next. If you have a gold bar, grab your lunch and then come back here, and then maybe you can find them also and ask some of your questions that you might not get to right now.
Hi, and I know that you were just talking about the details of that you have to report, and there's so many levels and layers to it. A lot of places are changing their technology to do portal reportings now and da-da-da. But when there are funding that's been sitting on because of a disarray of miscommunication.
Thank you for joining us. Please head to Pinion Pine for lunch. You are welcome to bring your plate back to Mountain Holly. Dietary details are posted near the buffet. As a reminder, the awardee luncheon will be in Golden Glow Snow Area.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Colorado Opioid Abatement Council, please go to the front near the banners to join us for a photo. So please, all members of the Colorado Opioid Abatement Council, please head to the front ahead of the banners near the front door for a photo. Thank you so much.
All right, sorry, I know everyone's hungry, but I just want to say this last thing. Some of the counties are not dispersing the funds fast enough. And you know, when you don't disperse those funds and you're supposed to get your money in July and you don't get it till the end of October, that literally causes those organizations to run a deficit, and we have to do better about oversight and making sure that these funds get released on a timely measure, because we are all in dire need of these funds. So, you know, if there's committees that can help those counties to better organize that, that really needs to happen.
Thank you.